I think a lot of people don't quite understand the extent to which the problem is like already arrived in the US for domestic
Yeah.
displacement. But I mean, certainly like both the US and continental Europe are going to face an immense amount of migration pressure, probably not on the order of these gigantic numbers that, you know, sometimes the defense establishment will bandy about, like 500 million displaced. And it's probably going to look like a more intense version of what we've already seen, right? And I don't think it's actually so hard to conceive of. Like the 2015 era migrant crisis in Europe was like, I think, a very, very, very instructive sort of foreshadowing event for what will happen in that continent and probably here as well, right? And like in 1998, I believe like there was a big Hurricane Mitch that hit El Salvador, and a bunch of El Salvadorian people came to the United States. There was a big influx of migrants there. Many of them were very poorly received, right? Even though they were fleeing, you know, extreme devastation. Yeah, I mean, the like past history on this in recent decades does not look good, and it's really hard to see how it gets better, because I think for most of the people in power, the fact that this displacement is going to roil the world is, and people would start to come to the wealthiest countries, is like a very, very bad thing, and something that would need to be avoided at all costs. And getting them to reframe that is challenging, and probably just requires new people.
Yeah, it requires a certain amount of selflessness and ability to see the long-term strategy and not short-term fundraising and election cycles and all this. But you're like, yeah, if we could only use the xenophobia of the right to our advantage to be like, hey, let's stop climate change so people don't have to come across the southern border. Does that work? No, probably won't work. It'll probably just fund ICE even more, brutalize migrants even more. But I love that you focus on, you know, people already living in the US. And of course, I think everyone wants to know, and this is the bullshit, the shit that annoys me, but also shit that's very real. And I think privately we're all kind of asking, which is, where do I move? Where should I go? Where is the safest? Is it the Pacific Northwest? Because it seems like it, unless that like one time in 500-year earthquake hits, and then it'll be, there's a tidal wave. I've read about this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that there's risk and there's risk, you know. I mean, I don't think there's any place in the US or really the world for that matter that could be said to be completely resilient to all forms of disaster. And if it was, then it's just pretty cold. I mean, a lot of people would say Buffalo, right? Like that's the number one place if you look at like sort of like maps of where it's Buffalo, and they had just a dreadful, dreadful, fatal snowstorm earlier this year.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, I was gonna say lake effect snow. Yeah, I don't know about Buffalo.
I mean, I think that, you know, generally, if you look on a 100-year timeline, right, and you don't have, you know, a serious improvement in warming trajectory, then the upper Midwest looks like it's safe from the worst things that we've seen so far, right? They have a lot of fresh water. They don't get hit by hurricanes, certainly get hit by wildfires for the most part. And, you know, it can always rain. It can rain everywhere, but it's, you know, that looks like the best place, because like Cincinnati, where there's a bunch of spare housing, the city was built to house twice the number of people that it currently does. Those are the places that look on paper like the best places to move. But, you know, when a bunch of people show up trying to flee some other place, oftentimes the people who already live there, then they get screwed, right? I mean,
I mean, yeah. No, I say this, I mean, it's a dumb question. It's a facetious question, obviously. But I mean, the answer really is we can't just fucking fend for ourselves. Otherwise we will all die. We can still demand mass action, of course. And we didn't even mention this, like the IPCC is out with yet another report saying we're even more fucked. Catastrophic warming will basically get us all. Like we're about to pass this dangerous threshold. I remember a few years ago we had 12 years left. I don't know how many years is it, Jake? Do we have like 7 years left here to stop keep it in the ground?
I'd probably say close to 7, or 6 or 7. But I think it's sort of like, I think they stopped saying that because they started to realize that people were thinking that if we passed it, then we should just give up. And I think they sort of said, we're not going to do a deadline anymore. I think, yeah, if you don't see some serious improvement in carbon intensity of the power grid by the end of the decade, then you're really going to start having to worry. I mean, you should already be worried, but you should
Yeah.
start worrying a lot more.
But there also is no money in retrofitting. I mean, we're talking about resilience, right? We're talking about preparedness. We're talking about, we know the shit is upon us already. Yes, we have to stop it on all these other levels. But like, where's the moneyed incentive to, remake Texas's power grid? You know, there is none.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the lucky thing is, I guess the silver lining is this stuff is pretty much, it's pretty popular across bipartisan lines. Like almost everybody says, yes, the government should pay to build a levee in front of my town. No one says, oh,
Right.
I'm just worried about the deficit. Like that concern doesn't come into play for people who live in these places. The problem is, you know, it really does. The only entity that has the money to do it is the US Congress, right? There just isn't another. A state can't do it, a city council can't do it, so it's all on the shoulders of the government to do, because like you say, private entities don't really have much skin in the game there, unless they're like issuing bonds or something.
Right.
Yeah, so it's on the feds and they have to do it, and they can do. People probably want them to do it, but it's a matter of like fixing that inertia problem, I think.
I mean, until Anderson Cooper's home is accessible via gondola in the middle of Manhattan or wherever he lives, and we go there and hold him hostage. Idea. No, but I mean, that's the only thing I'm looking forward to is just, yes, Manhattan, but like gondolas throughout it.
In general.
Very,
very.
This is the AI. This is the AI movie depiction of Manhattan.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. And then sort of Greta Thunberg's voice blaring in like some hologram, like, I warned you. Fuck you. You know, that. I
mean, don't we?
Blade Runner.
Would it require really a massive completely a total realignment of how we do things to actually address what's going on? Like we'd need a Roman style dictator. Like we would need a person, and I don't mean dictator like a Hitler dictator. I mean like in the classical sense, a person who's given complete carte
blanche. Someone who can move fast.
To move shit and no Congress. I mean, isn't the truth that even with the United States doing this, that you would need to figure out some common agreement around the globe to undo what's going on.
Well, the climate bone is connected to the China bone, which we are
it's us in China
completely fucking it up. You know, it would just look, why don't we send Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan one more again, you know, just to see what that does to the appetite to bring China to the table. Anyway, Jake, on the international front, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really hard to imagine a global solution to the problem of fossil fuels it's impossible to imagine a non-global solution to the problem of fossil fuels, because wealthy countries can always export the production of them elsewhere if they want to stop, right? That's what Europe has essentially done. And I mean, the US right now in conversations at the UN conferences is like the single biggest obstacle to any meaningful progress on the question of like what are essentially reparations to countries that have experienced the worst of this, right? So those countries have, almost everyone supports it except for the United States. Wow. And they've finally started to back off of that, the tiniest degree, like 1 yard. But I mean, unless the biggest countries, the US, China, India, in Europe can go to those conferences and say, we want to take the lead, we want to give money, we're ready to give it up, our companies are going to have to come to heel, then you're not going to reach a final, resolution to that problem, in my opinion.
Wow, what a bummer, Jake.
Very happy ending, but
Jake, bummer Biddle.
But it's possible. It's definitely possible. You know?
Oh, it is. Yeah. But another world is no. I fully believe that. But I think we need a little bit of column A, column B, a little bit of like rise up everybody, and a little bit of like, hey, let's work with what we got now.
Yeah. But it's not done. Like, it's really not done. And that's like the number one thing that, I don't know, in every casual conversation about this, like, it's definitely not over.
No,
it's definitely not too late.
Well, in other words, you're saying it's not over. Like we're all not on like a path to like death and destruction.
No,
there's all these exits.
Not. Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's still it's a live ball for sure, and it will be.
And
we just need to invent zero-point energy.
Well, that's the thing about like inventing, like trying to find the silver bullet. It's like, that's all bullshit. Like it's right in front of us. It's also, and it has in it, like Anthony said, it has everything to do with reining in unfettered global capitalism where corporations can treat the earth like, a fucking toilet. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.